There are certain moments in sports where you stop looking at statistics and start realizing you might be watching something that will never happen again. Every generation has that one athlete who changes the way people think about what is possible. Someone who does not just dominate their era, but forces the entire sport to rewrite its own expectations. And right now, that player is Shohei Ohtani, because for over 100 years, baseball has been searching for the ultimate two-way superstar, a player who could step onto the mound and dominate elite hitters, then walk into the batter's box and become the biggest offensive threat on the field. The closest comparison people always make is Babe Ruth, the legend who transformed baseball forever, the player who became synonymous with power, greatness, and changing the game. But here is the part that most people overlook. Shohei Ohtani is not simply following Babe Ruth's path. He is doing something Babe Ruth never actually accomplished. Something no player in modern baseball history has ever done. He is attempting to become the first true two-way player to reach the absolute peak of both sides of the game at the same time. A player who could realistically compete for the MVP award because of his hitting, while also competing for the Cy Young award because of his pitching. And that is not just impressive. That is something baseball has never seen before. The reason this comparison with Babe Ruth is so fascinating is because it forces people to look deeper into baseball history. Babe Ruth was incredible. There is no argument there. He was one of the greatest hitters the sport has ever produced, and his impact on baseball cannot be overstated. He helped change the game from a low-scoring strategy-based sport into a power-driven spectacle, where fans came to see home runs and unforgettable moments. But when people say Babe Ruth was a two-way player like Ohtani, that comparison is not completely accurate. Early in his career, Ruth was an excellent pitcher. He was a dominant left-handed starter before becoming the greatest slugger baseball had ever seen. But once he became the Babe Ruth everyone remembers, the pitcher almost disappeared. His career shifted completely toward hitting. He was no longer throwing against major league hitters every week, while also chasing offensive records. That is the difference with Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani is not choosing between being a pitcher and being a hitter. He is doing both. He is not a great hitter who occasionally pitches. He is not a great pitcher who can swing the bat. He is a superstar in two completely different areas of baseball at the same time, and that is what makes his current journey so unbelievable. The wildest part about Ohtani's story is that baseball spent decades telling us this was impossible. Coaches, analysts, and executives all believed that the human body could not handle the workload. Pitching at the highest level requires an incredible amount of physical stress. A pitcher has to repeat the same explosive motion hundreds of times while protecting their arm through a 6-month season. Hitting requires a completely different skill set. It requires lightning-fast reactions, elite timing, and the ability to adjust against pitchers throwing different speeds and movements every night. Most players spend their entire lives trying to master one side of the game. They dedicate everything to becoming the best pitcher or the best hitter they can possibly be. Ohtani decided to challenge that idea completely. He looked at two of the hardest jobs in baseball and decided he wanted to master both. And somehow, he has not only survived doing it, he has reached a level where people are starting to ask if he is the greatest baseball talent we have ever witnessed. The numbers explain why. When Ohtani takes the mound, he is not just there to give his team innings, he is there to dominate. His velocity, his strikeout ability, his control, and his confidence all show the development of a true ace pitcher. But then, when he steps into the batter's box, the entire stadium changes. Every pitch becomes dangerous because everyone knows he has the ability to completely change a game with one swing. And this is where the conversation becomes bigger than statistics. Because Shohei Ohtani is not just chasing awards, he is challenging the definition of greatness itself. For decades, baseball has separated players into categories. Pitchers have their awards. Hitters have their awards. The best players usually specialize in one area and dominate it. But Ohtani has created a problem for baseball because he does not fit into one category. He has become an exception to the rules. When voters look at the MVP race, they are not just comparing him against other hitters. They have to consider everything he provides on the mound. When people discuss the Cy Young race, they cannot ignore that this same player is also producing offense at an elite level. The value he creates is almost impossible to measure because there is no historical example that perfectly matches him. Previous legends have dominated. Previous legends have won MVP awards. Previous legends have changed the game. but nobody has combined these two completely different forms of excellence in the modern era. That is why the Babe Ruth comparison exists, but also why Ohtani is creating his own category. Ruth changed baseball. Ohtani is changing what baseball players can be. Now comes the biggest question. Can he actually finish the season by accomplishing something that would become one of the rarest achievements in sports history? Can he become a true two-way player who competes for both the MVP and Cy Young awards in the same season? The challenge is enormous because baseball seasons are long, exhausting, and unpredictable. One injury, one bad stretch, or one small weakness can completely change a player's story. But the reason people are paying attention is because Ohtani has already done things everyone thought were unrealistic. He has already broken the traditional rules of baseball. He has already proven that the impossible might actually be possible. And if he continues on this path, we might not just be watching another great season from a superstar. We might be watching the creation of a baseball achievement that future generations will compare every player against. Because Babe Ruth became a legend by changing the game forever. But Shohei Ohtani has the opportunity to do something even more unique. He has the chance to become the first player to prove that one person can truly be the best pitcher and the best hitter at the same time. Something Babe Ruth never did. Something baseball has never seen before. And the most unbelievable part is that the story is still being written. The reason this season feels different is because Shohei Ohtani is not simply chasing another personal milestone. He is chasing something that does not even have a name yet. Baseball has records for home runs, strikeouts, batting averages, wins, and every other measurable achievement imaginable. But there is no category for it. There is no historical blueprint. There is no player from the past who can tell us exactly what happens next. Because nobody has ever reached this level as both a hitter and a pitcher during the same season. That is what separates Ohtani from every comparison people have made before. When we talk about legends like Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, or other all-time greats, we are talking about players who mastered one part of the game at an unbelievable level. But Ohtani is creating a different conversation. He is forcing baseball fans to ask a question they never had to ask before. What if the greatest player is not someone who dominates one side of the sport, but someone who dominates both? And that is why every game he plays feels bigger than just another regular season matchup. Every at-bat matters. Every inning matters. Every start on the mound carries historical weight because we understand that we might be watching something that baseball may never see again. The numbers are what make this story impossible to ignore, because this is not just a beautiful idea or a fantasy created by fans. Ohtani has the production to support the argument. When he pitches, he has the ability to control an entire game. He attacks hitters with elite velocity, creates swings and misses, and shows the type of command that separates good pitchers from great ones. When he is healthy and locked in, he looks like a legitimate ace capable of competing with the best pitchers in baseball. But then comes the part that breaks every traditional baseball comparison. After preparing his arm to throw against major league hitters, he steps into the batter's box and becomes one of the most feared offensive players in the sport. He does not just contribute, he changes the way opposing teams approach the game. Pitchers cannot relax when facing him because one mistake can leave the stadium. Defenses cannot shift their attention away because he has the speed and athletic ability to impact the game in multiple ways. The margin for error disappears when Ohtani is involved. And that is something baseball has never had to deal with before. Usually, teams prepare for a superstar's strength. With Ohtani, they have to prepare for everything. The most fascinating part of this entire story is that even his weaknesses are different from everyone else's. A normal player has a bad stretch, and people start questioning whether he can recover. A normal pitcher struggles, and analysts start looking at mechanics, velocity, and confidence. But with Ohtani, the expectations are completely different because the standard he has created is almost unrealistic. If he goes through a few games without a hit, people immediately ask what is wrong. If he gives up a few runs, people wonder if the magic is disappearing. But that is because the baseball world has become used to seeing something that should not be normal. A player doing two impossible jobs has somehow made people expect perfection. And that might be the biggest sign of how special he truly is. The fact that a player can have a small slump and still be considered one of the most valuable athletes in the entire league tells you everything. Most players need everything going right to reach greatness. Ohtani can have one side of his game struggling and still remain among the best because the other side is so extraordinary. That is not normal production. That is generational talent. Now, when the conversation returns to Babe Ruth, this is where things become even more interesting. Babe Ruth will always be one of baseball's greatest icons. His name is permanently connected to greatness. He changed the sport and became the standard that every superstar was compared against for generations. But Shohei Ohtani represents something different. Ruth proved that a player could revolutionize hitting. Ohtani is proving that a player does not have to choose one path. He is showing future generations that specialization is not the only way to greatness. A young player growing up today can look at Ohtani and believe that being both a pitcher and a hitter is not impossible. That might be his greatest impact. The statistics, awards, and records will always matter, but changing what people believe is possible is something only a few athletes in history accomplish. Michael Jordan changed basketball. Tiger Woods changed golf. Tom Brady changed football. And Ohtani is changing baseball's understanding of what a superstar can be. If he finishes this journey, the argument will not just be about whether he belongs with Babe Ruth. The argument will be whether anyone in baseball history has ever combined talent, athletic ability, and impact in the same way. And that is why the next few months are so important. Because history is not created when people predict it. History is created when someone actually does something nobody thought they could do. There have been countless talented players throughout baseball history who had incredible seasons. Players who hit more home runs. Players who won more games. Players who dominated their competition. But what Ohtani is attempting is different because it requires excellence in two completely separate worlds. He is not trying to break one record. He is trying to achieve something that has never existed. A season where the same player is considered among the best hitters and the best pitchers in baseball simultaneously. If he succeeds, the comparison to Babe Ruth may actually become incomplete. Because Ruth was the greatest of his era, but Ohtani could become the greatest example of versatility the sport has ever seen. The most unbelievable part is that he is doing this in an era where competition is deeper, training is more advanced, and every weakness is analyzed immediately. There are no easy matchups anymore. There are no hidden advantages. Every team has data, technology, and scouting designed to stop players like him. Yet Ohtani continues to find ways to dominate. That is what makes this story so special. Baseball has spent 150 years searching for the impossible player. The perfect combination of power, skill, intelligence, and athletic ability. And now that player might already be here. Shohei Ohtani is not trying to become the next Babe Ruth. He is creating a legacy that stands beside him. A legacy built on something Babe Ruth never did, something nobody before him accomplished, and something future generations may spend decades trying to understand. Because when the history of baseball is written, this season may not be remembered as the year Shohei Ohtani won another award. It may be remembered as the year baseball discovered there was a level of greatness it had never seen before.